Hello, everyone. If anyone's watching or if you're watching later on, this is Scarf Sessions. It's a stream where we have conversations with people shaping the landscape in open source and open source sustainability. And today I have my coworker, Alex, who I'm excited to talk to. We were just chatting a second ago that we work together, but we haven't really talked much. So I have Alex here today. Alex, introduce yourself before we get started.
Hi, thanks for the introduction, Christina. I'm Alex. I live in Hamburg, Germany, and part of the Scarf team as a technical lead. The one with the big dog. I think she's around somewhere here.
Nice.
And usually, struggling with the time zone differences.
Yeah, I encourage dogs or cats in streams, so it doesn't bother me if the dog shows up. Thankfully, I kicked my Mastiff out. He snores really loud, so he's not allowed on the stream. But I don't mind if they come in. So Alex is going to talk to us today, kind of about first. We'll dive in a little bit about what you do at Scarf. At Scarf, we use Haskell, so we'll probably talk about Haskell a little bit. And then we also want to talk about the open source project that Alex recently put out there called Tie. So those are the things we'll be chatting about for anyone listening. So Alex, tell me a little bit about what you do kind of day to day at Scarf, or even you can go further back if you want and tell us how like you got into development and how'd you come to Scarf?
I guess my origin story, so to speak, is the classic boring one. Studies information technologies, computer science, and from there starting out as a contractor and contract for various companies over the course of the last few years.
I'm going to say that's not boring because I am self-taught, but I think anyone who actually went through the whole like getting a degree and everything like that, it's really not something that I did, and so I admire it.
That being said, I didn't make it to the end of my master's studies.
Oh.
I dropped out eventually.
Yeah.
The usual conflicts.
I dropped out when I was going for education, so that's all right. So how'd you end up at Scarf?
I was actually Scarf was brought to my attention by close friends Shay Levi, who also worked as an engineering manager for some time at Scarf, and was referring me, and so we started out as a team here.
Awesome.
Building up the engineering team, basically.
Cool. And can you talk a little bit about kind of what engineering structure, the languages, the different things we use at Scarf are for our Scarf product?
Oh yeah, sure, of course. So we use like a different mix of languages. Like we're very heterogeneous, though there are like two things that stand out for the main products, which are Haskell for the backend and for the data processing, metrics pipeline and all. And the other one is, of course, JavaScript for the front end, for the for the UI of the product.
Yeah.
And one of the defining aspects of our infrastructure is that we use something called NICs to assemble all the infrastructure bits, build out our binaries, build the containers from those binaries, and help manage, distribute our artifacts for deployment.
Really awesome. For anyone watching, and if you don't if you don't know the answer, that's fine too. But can you kind of dive in a little bit more about like what's the difference between Haskell and other languages? Why did Scarf choose Haskell? And just kind of talk about Haskell a little bit more.
Oh yeah, Scarf is like a functional programming languages that touts itself as being purely functional. And one of the street legends of Haskell is that if it compiles, it works, right? Which is, of course, not always true, but it's a good approximation for a lot of things. And coming from that sort of background, our founder, Avi, decided that would be like a good foundation for a software, for a product.
Very cool. Yeah. I personally have not worked with Haskell at all. I have seen it because of our team here, but I was definitely more of a front-end person, very familiar with JavaScript and all those fun things, but definitely learning more about the Haskell, Nix, all those kinds of communities. And thankfully, we have a lot of great Haskell engineers at Scarf, so that's been really cool to see and learn from.
Yeah, we've assembled a great pool of people here. Very cool.
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk a little bit about open source. I know now you've open source Thai, which we'll dive more into, but what has been your relationship with open source? Have you done open source before coming to Scarf? How did you get into it now?
Right. I've always been like an active open source contributor. Most of the time, very specifically to the Haskell ecosystem.
Okay.
I've been contributing to a lot of the Haskell infrastructure as well. I've been, for a few years, I was a maintainer for Haddock. It's the de facto standard documentation tooling around Haskell for Haskell. And I also contributed to the core build system called Cabal, and also contributed a few small patches, a small few changes to GHG itself, as well as all the ecosystem around it, basically.
I'm always interested with open source on how people got started. Was it something that you were just using these things, so you decided to contribute to the project? Were you specifically like, hey, I want to go do something with open source, or like, how did you get started with it?
I think I'm kind of a pragmatist in that regard. I noticed something isn't working, and now you have the chance to either build it yourself or piggyback on what's already there and improve it. And the pragmatic choice is, of course, to not reinvent the wheel and improve what's there and iterate on that. And that's what brought me to open source, and what brings me to contributing to open source even today.
Awesome.
Still, yeah.
I did get a little comment just real quick in YouTube. I don't know if maybe it's like your mic or something, but you're coming in a little bit choppy, Alex, just so you know, and we can work around that if we can't figure that out. But just as a heads up, that's what's going on. Got a comment around. So,
thanks, Avi.
Yeah, thank you, Avi. Yeah, so let's dive into then Thai. How did you decide? I'm gonna, where did Thai? How was Thai born? Let's start there. Like, where did Thai come from? How was this project born? Let's start there first before we dive into more of it.
Right. What is so basically we're in the process of revamping our UI for our product, and we noticed we thought it would be a good time for us to also not only revamp the user interface but also revamp the underlying parts that serve those UIs. And so basically the API. Right now it's written in a very ad hoc way, grown historically with all the words, or with some words, sorry.
Aren't all
right now
open source projects? It's
written
okay.
in Servant. It's written in Servant right now, which is like a very popular library to define web APIs in Haskell.
Okay.
And it's a very common choice. People use it, people love it, hate it, I don't know. It's common.
Yeah.
It's a common choice. And also Haskell is basically when using Servant, you define your API in Haskell itself. Your API contract, your contract becomes Haskell code. And that's great. Haskell is known for being great for writing domain-specific languages. But we at Scarf, when we had the chance to revamp the API, we found that we looked at what we had and analyzed all the shortcomings and disadvantages that we saw, and we found that defining your API in Haskell itself, is prone to the usual developer habits. I mean, something that developers do usually, right? They build out patterns and mechanisms to type out lines of codes, right? They reduce duplication. They make things, they consolidate things to make it shorter, to make it more correct, to avoid repeating yourself, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And what that leads to, if you have your API defined, your contract defined in Haskell itself, and developers iterating on it happened that the API itself gets less and less explicit because it's hidden behind all those patterns and structures that we build in order to ease the writing of the API itself.
Yeah.
And that kind of made it very hard for us to actually, find out what the API itself is, right?
Yeah.
Like, what is the actual route for this particular endpoint?
Yeah.
You have to look it up and dig deep in order to find out. And another issue with what we found is we often ended up with something I call like scope creep. So sometimes types that are meant for the public contract, for the public API contract of the API, make it into the domain and business logic. And I mean, sometimes even into the database model.
Yeah.
Right. Which means that in the long term, you are basically coupling your API contract, which you want to support for your customers over potentially very long time, right, to the internal logic of your product. And every time you want to make like a seemingly internal change to your logic, you might accidentally change the public contract as well, which of course is totally you don't want that, right? It's it might break customers' code when they rely on your API.
Yeah.
And the standard canonical form solution to this problem is kind of, always work with kind of an intermediate layer that makes sure that there is a clear boundary between the public contract and the internal domain logic, business logic types.
Yeah.
So basically, this brought me to like two realizations. We want an explicit, human readable, even for non-Haskellers, API contract, which we can even share, right? We can give it to customers. That would be great, right? We just pass the contract to the customers and they know exactly what to expect. And the other thing is, I wanted to settle on code generation.
Okay.
That means I don't want to type out these very boring interface types or contract types myself. I really want a tool to have it generated for me so that I never, ever accidentally make a change in the Haskell code that, would break the contract again.
Yeah.
Right. And that's basically, with those goals in mind, a common choice today, and for what I think is a dominant standard in these kind of things is OpenAPI.
Okay.
It's basically OpenAPI denotes a domain-specific language to model web APIs on top of YAML, basically. Yeah. And what we did with Thai, this is where Thai comes into play. Thai understands OpenAPI.
Okay.
And Thai takes an API specified in the OpenAPI format and generates Haskell code from it in such a way that we can, only have to implement the actual handlers for the specific routes, and don't have to deal with all those serialization logics and peculiarities. So
awesome. And I'm sharing a link, but also for anyone watching this later on, I will put these different links that we're kind of mentioning, or different places, even OpenAPI and stuff. We'll put those in the description later on YouTube, so anyone can kind of grab those things. That's really interesting. So I think a lot of people get into open source or even create an open source project because they have some kind of problem that they want to fix, especially when they're working on something. So that's really cool that that's what you all decided to do. How was it open sourcing this project? Did you find that hard at all? What were things that maybe were unexpected or that you didn't know you would need when you were trying to open source something?
Right. So one of the things that I fell really short on at first was writing like good documentation and README.
Mm-hmm.
Even posting like an example in the
Yeah.
first weeks of the repository being open source, unannounced at all for sure, right?
Yeah.
But still, it didn't have a README, it didn't have like how to use. We were already using it in production basically, right? It was born as a weekend project after like 2 or 3 days of work, and we were putting it into production like after that weekend basically, right? So I had like in terms of production support, I had that fish to fry first.
It's okay. This is why other teams, bigger teams and stuff have like dedicated documentation and things. I totally understand. To Alex's credit, he very quickly, not too long after doing that, messaged me. I've been an open source community manager in the past, and asked me like, how do I make a good README? I want a good README for this. So we worked to like make sure he did, and he does have a really great README. Definitely check out the link on there. Of we have our usage examples, installation guide, all that great stuff that README should have. And so you all did a great job getting that up, even though you have tons of other things to work on. I think that's a really good point, though. As a maintainer, a lot of times you'll see someone really wants to put something out because it's like a tool they were using and it was helpful for them, but maybe they don't have time for everything else, like the documentation and things like that. How do you have any advice for anyone putting anything out? I know you're still kind of doing this now and you're the maintainer now, but do you have any advice for anyone who's wanting to put their stuff out there as well?
Don't let how to say, don't let be the perfect the enemy of the good. Right? Be bold, put it up. Yes, you can add the documentation. You should definitely add the documentation and all the parts that got lost on the in the initial phase of the project. But what's more important, I think, is getting initial feedback on the project itself.
Yeah. No, 100%. When we talked to Tanner before, that was something he mentioned as well. Pretty much the same thing. Just like you have to be able to put things out there, and actually that feedback that you get is wonderful because then you can make your project even better. So if someone wanted to if someone wanted to contribute, can they contribute to TIE?
Oh, yes. This is actually one thing, Christina, that's missing from the README right now. We should put it in there, like a call for contribution.
Yes. Yeah, right? That's easy. I can help you with that. Awesome. Yeah, well, definitely. So anyone who's wanting to check out TIE, seeing it, we got a good amount of stars already on this project. So anyone wanting to contribute to it, we will be adding a contributor guide I can help you with an area where people can contribute. And then, that's wonderful. So it is open for contributions, folks.
Yes, please. And use it. Use it. It's pretty much tailored to our spec that we've been developing internally. But one of the criticisms I have, like one of the sentiment when I reached out to similar projects in the Haskell space, similar in spirit, they said like, hey, yeah, you want an open API specification, just use Servant. And I'm like, hey, I'm just coming from Servant, right? Why?
Yeah.
What's going on? And just accepting that there are environments in which you only have the open API specification and not a Servant specification.
Yeah.
And these are completely neglected by the sentiment of writing everything in Haskell itself.
Yeah. So I'm going to maybe not pivot. We're not going to pivot here, but we're still talking about TIE. What's what's the future of TIE? What do you want with it? Is there anything? Are you happy with like putting it out there and having people iterate on it? Are there any goals for it going forward? Are you working on anything else that you're hoping to open source?
Oh yeah. So one thing that so TIE is of course not finished. It doesn't support all of OpenAPI setup, right? The standard is vast. Really, this is the call for contribution right here, right? Use it, help us improve it, like file issues. we will make sure to, or we can definitely help and guide any changes and improvements. That being said, one of my pet peeves is, in general, having human readable specification. No, sorry, that's not my pet peeve. My pet peeve is proper code generation for contracts for external systems. For example, databases.
Okay.
People like to use ORMs and query generators and all that.
Can you tell people what ORM is, if anyone doesn't know?
Object relational mappers.
Okay, thank you.
Right, like active record in Ruby, Django in Python, and so on. And I really want to go from SQL, from your migrations folder, because it's actually your migrations folder is actually the source of truth for your schema of the database, of your database, right? And I want a tool that takes this migration folder, generates you the types, very similar to what Tye does, right? Generate types that reflect the records, the structure of the tables in the database, and then also allows you to basically ingest SQL and generate small wrappers around that SQL, which are typed, so that you can use your SQL to write queries, to define tables, to alter tables, and so on and so on, but still have the good old Haskell type system to help you with so that you don't mix up your types.
And just for me, someone coming in, if you don't know, this is okay, because I don't know how much you know about TypeScript. Someone who doesn't know Haskell, types in Haskell similar to types, like with TypeScript, just making sure it's like saying with a certain thing there. I don't know how to explain this a little bit better, but can you explain types a little bit for me with Haskell?
It's actually the same concept as in TypeScript, for example, right? Putting a type to a value, basically stating that a value of type string can only, handle strings, right?
Yes.
Awesome. It's very similar. It's basically the same concept.
Cool. I just want to make sure anyone watching doesn't know Haskell. If you're familiar at all with front end or TypeScript, then a similar instance in that way. Very cool. So what else are you working on? So is that what you're hoping to work on outside of Tye? Or are you hoping to bring Tye, improve on Tye so that it's doing that as well?
I'm sorry. I should have made the distinction a bit more clearer. That is actually a separate project.
Okay.
I found there is a project called SQLC, which is also an open source project, which I am building in my free time. A plugin to generate Haskell code. And this is very similar in spirit to Tye, as I was mentioning earlier.
Okay. Very cool. And are you hoping to open source that one?
Yes, of course.
Awesome.
Of course.
So everyone keep an eye out for those things. Again, we will add ways for people to contribute. We encourage you to contribute already, but as far as contributing guide and kind of steps on how to do that, we'll be adding that later on so that people can do that. So tell me anything else you want to tell me about Tye. Is there anything else you want to make sure we touch on? I don't want to leave anything out.
I love the logo that Karolani, our designer, made for it. That's it's a really good one. You should check it out.
Yes, definitely go to the site, check it out. We have a wonderful designer. She did all the designs for our stream as well. And she, Alex came to her and said, "Hey, we need a logo," after talking to me. And I was like, "Hey, you need a logo." And so they came up with this wonderful logo that is on the Tye README. Definitely check it out and see it. And Karolani, again, is our wonderful designer who is always working and doing wonderful things for us as far as design goes.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Karolani.
Yeah. So tell me anything else about you, Alex, that you want people to know. Is there anything else that, you're excited working on outside of Scarf? Do you have any other projects besides the ones you just mentioned? I know that you just mentioned several, so if you don't, that's totally understandable.
Yes, I have many irons in the fire with those projects already. I'm trying to keep up with my wife, or wife to be precise.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And trying to, give the dog the best time as well.
What kind of dog do you have?
It's a mix between
Mix.
a German Shepherd and Griffin, like wirehead pointed
Oh,
Griffin. Yeah,
that is a
it's a good one.
odd mix, but looks. I've seen your dog that you've posted a picture before, so it is an adorable dog.
I
Awesome.
actually I brought when I announced Thai in Zurich in Switzerland um,
Uh-huh.
a few weeks back. I actually wasn't able to get like a dog sitter, and
Mm,
so I took her with me on that conference, and she also
nice.
came with me on the stage. Actually,
Nice.
she actually presented Thai, more or less.
Awesome. There's no better way to present like a new thing. Everyone's gonna be like, "Yes, talk to us, please. You have a dog here." So, talk about that a little bit. How was that experience? Like going to that, announcing Thai. Like, what was that experience like?
It was the reception was great. The reception
Awesome.
was great. Talking to people, telling them, explaining our problems, and it showed that many people in the Haskell ecosystem and probably even beyond have very, very similar problems. Um,
Hmm.
in terms of we need like a explicit specification of our API contracts, and
Yeah.
we need ways that help us sharpen this border and create this border between interfaces and domain logic. And all the people, all the companies are having the same problems. That was great to
Yeah.
hear.
Yeah.
Really good to hear.
Awesome. Anyone having those problems and watching, contribute to Thai. We will
Ah,
love your contributions to improve it. Or, start a discussion around things that can be improved, where we are always happy to talk open source and ways to improve things. So, Alex, I have one more question for you. And again, thank you for coming on. This is Alex's first stream, right?
right.
First stream?
Yeah.
Yes. So
The
thank
very
you for
first.
coming on. Yay. One more question for you. What are you excited about with Scarf? Like, what's the next thing what are you working on now? What are you excited about at the future of Scarf and the things you're working on right now?
I'm more of a boiler room engineer uh, right now, and I'm working with my colleagues to improve the scalability of the system. Right,
Mm-hmm.
we're having some growing pains, and
Yeah.
customer base is growing. Right, number
Mm-hmm.
of requests is growing constantly, very nicely, like
Yeah.
very much as we would
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, the system has to scale with the growing user base, which is, of course, I think we did a pretty good job there,
Mm-hmm.
and it's good to see it working out.
Yeah, I've been able to be privy to a lot of those conversations within our Slack and seeing the work you all have done, and it's been really awesome to see. You all have, it's not easy work, and you all are doing a fantastic job of doing that and making sure our customers are happy and getting the scarf they want. So again, Alex, is there anything else you want to close with? Anything else you want to say before we hop off?
Thanks for hosting this Scarf sessions, Christina,
Yeah, I loved it.
and
I loved to talk to you.
also yeah, get well, Avi,
Yes, Avi
if you're
could
still
not be here,
watching.
our other host, feeling under the weather, and we hope he'll be on for the next one that we'll have coming out soon. We'll make an announcement for the next one we're having. Hopefully, have one lined up for September. So, definitely excited to continue these chats. And again, Alex, thank you for joining me. Thank you, everyone watching.